Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. How are you all doing? Well, despite me basically claiming in the last video when we were checking out these new Australian AFD 2V Cleveland cylinder head Chinese copies, that I wasn't going to really muck around too much with these as far as doing any port work goes. But, of course, me being a bit OCD, I've decided that I'm going to just spend a tiny little bit of time just touching up a couple of things that have already been looked at by Total Performance, who these cylinder heads were purchased from. They've already done the majority of the work, but I've just got my little flap disc here on my Dremel shaft, and I'm just smoothing a little bit more where I can feel some really obvious sharp edges in the bowls, okay, on the short side radius and the back of the bowls here a little bit. Being really careful not to touch my valve seats and not change any of the shapes, of course. I'm only taking minor material out here. I'm just smoothing anything that's still a little bit rough. Just so then, when I put these back in my car, I know that I've done the utmost I can to make sure these are going to flow the very best they can. Otherwise, what is the point of putting them in the car? I'm even really tempted to have a crack, and you can see here I've got a dummy valve in. I'm tempted to even think about maybe smoothing these combustion chambers to smooth them. I'm not sure if I really want to do that, and it's probably overkill for the end of the day for this car, which is going to be primarily driven on the street with a little bit of, giving the car a little bit of a squirt every now and then, having a bit of fun with some of my mates, you know, some traffic light to traffic light racing. So I'm probably definitely going over the top if I'm going to do all of that business. If I wanted to really pick up some more flow, then yes, doing that would be an advantage. But for the application, just doing what I'm doing now is just going to satisfy the finicky side of me when it comes to the way that there's some minor imperfections in these cylinder heads with some of the castings, really minor, and they're only in a couple of the bowls to begin with anyway, and I'm just going to clean up those couple of little bit of casting floors where they're just a little bit rough in a couple of areas, and then I'm just going to call it a day. The main thing I was concerned with about these cylinder heads were, they looked to me, just by eyeballing them, it looked like they were a little bit wider than what the stock iron 302 Aussie 2Vs were. And indeed they are. When I've measured these, they are 4mm in width wider than what the stock 2Vs are. That won't be an issue. I was a little bit worried that they were going to be wide, so wide that when I went to put these back in the car, I might have some issues with my headers to my shock towers, okay, because it's really tight. Even with the stock 302 2Vs, it's very tight. Once your headers go on and once the engine is in the engine bay, there's no space. Your spark plugs leads are basically sitting right on the shock tower. So as it turns out, these are 4mm wider than stock Aussie 302 factory iron 2V cylinder heads. 4mm. That will be okay. I've got that sort of clearance to my shock tower, no problems. Hey guys, so I finished working on these, and I reckon I spent probably about 45 minutes just cleaning up some of the castings in these aluminium cylinder heads, these AFD 2V copies. And all I did, you can just see there where there's the casting line in the exhausts. Really, that was a little bit on the rough side. All I did was I just smoothed that down using a combination of stones and my flap discs. It was very quick. That's the exhaust. And I did exactly the same thing for the intake runners. Just a quick clean, mainly where the casting line was. In the heads, it was a little bit on the rough side and I wanted to smooth it out. There was a couple of little imperfections in the bottom of the bowl. You can see here on this one, I've just smoothed it a little bit down the bottom there. Sorry guys, it's hard to get decent light here. It was only this runner that needed it, just to the left of the valve guide boss there. There was a bit of a chunk there that I've just smoothed, and there was one in this runner as well, just to the left of the valve guide boss. They just got smooth. Let's have a look at the bowls. And all I've done is I just took it a little bit further on the lip that they'd already removed with the carbide, and just with my flap disc, I just smoothed the bowl there, and I went right around. We won't really be able to see, but on the short side radius, I also just took a bit of the sharp lift off the short side radius in the exhaust ports, just where the casting line was there. I've just smoothed it on that side, on both sides, done a bit of smoothing in the exhaust port as well, in the bowl. And that's all I've done. You can see there in this intake, that's where I took off a little bit of a casting flare there. There was a bit of a lump there. I just smoothed off with my stones. Again, I've just smoothed all around the throat where they'd already used the carbide to take the sharp lip off. I just smoothed that a little bit more with the flap disc, and I went right around and took the sharp lip off the short side radius side, and that's just been done for all of the bowls. About 45 minutes worth of porting has really cleaned these up, and I think will help them improve just that little bit more. And I have decided I am not going to go to the trouble of completely smoothing the combustion chambers. What I thought I'd show you guys is just how these intake runners are lining up with a decent Fel-Pro gasket. Now, there was a couple of little things I had to do to the gasket. There would be a tiny little bit of port matching intake, well, gasket port matching that could take place with these heads, but it's minimal. I wouldn't bother. But what I did discover is that on this port and on this port, there was quite a bit of overlap from the gasket itself. So I had to get my Stanley knife out and just trim the gasket where it hung into the port a little bit, just on this runner and just on this runner. And then I basically got my little die grinder with the stone and just smoothed up the jagged edges, which I'll tidy up a little bit more as well before this is actually assembled. That was just something I wanted to point out, that the gasket is a good match. There's no issues with any bad core shift with these heads. It's just that the gasket here, when lined up with the bolt holes for the intake manifold, it did have a little bit of overlap into the port on this one and on this one only, and that was just a matter of just shaving that gasket down a bit. As I say, I'll clean this up, and that will be really fine for the intake when it gets bolted up to these heads. I want to show you something with the exhaust side now, because maybe some people in the community might have some thoughts about this. I would like to hear your opinions. So let's have a look at that now. So these cylinder heads claim that they are 80 thousandths of an inch raised on the exhaust port to get a better exhaust port. Okay, this is done on many cylinder heads, but as you can see, you've got two different hole locations here that you could possibly set up your headers. Now you can see if I set them up on the top bolt hole locations here, we've got a massive overlap this way, okay, and that is that's actually in the roof, okay, of the exhaust. We move them to the second bolt hole location, which is the floor of the exhaust port here. We don't have near as much, we're not going to have near as much overlap. Now I'll put these 2V header gaskets on my headers, and of course they're a perfect match to my headers. So when my headers go on this exhaust port, it's gonna, the exhaust port here on the cylinder head is most definitely going to shroud my headers. Now, good or bad, guys, I would assume not ideal. My headers, my 2V headers, are larger than the exhaust port. Is that going to be an issue? I've never used cylinder heads with raised ports on the exhaust, so I am not sure which way to go, whether you would select the top bolt hole location, which is way more shrouding. In fact, I'm not comfortable with that at all. because it's going to shroud the floor of the exhaust port, and I think that's not a good thing whatsoever. So I would go the lower bolt location here. It's not going to affect anything as far as where my headers are sitting. They're not going to contact anything in the car or anything like that with only that amount of change. The thing that does annoy me a bit though is that 80 thousandths of an inch is about little over 2.3 millimeters. And when I select 2.3 millimeters on my digital veneers here, as you can see, there is way more overlap, right, than what you see here. That may not be the measurement that's taken. Maybe it's the measurement from the bolt hole where they're raised from the original. It could be that. Regardless of which way it's measured, the 80 thou raised I'm talking about here, or 2.3 millimeters, what I'm trying to work out is, do I just put up with the fact that I'm going to have some of my header shrouded, or should I get my die grinder? Should I mark these on the exhaust port? And should I just do a blend? I wouldn't chunk. There's no way I would bring the floor down to be the same distance down. I wouldn't enlarge the exhaust port at all. I think that could be very detrimental to the way that these heads flow. I wouldn't do that, but I would be very tempted to blend, to angle, you know, and blend in just a little bit more of a match here. So then basically my header flange is not completely shrouded by this part of the cylinder head. What are your opinions? I've done some research on the internet trying to work this out, and I hear all sorts of arguments for and against these sorts of situations where they say, look, that'll cause reversion, that's good. Depends on how much reversion, depends on the cylinder head, depends on the application of the cylinder head. For my street-driven 393 stroke at Cleveland that I'm going to have a bit of fun in every now and then with my buddies, I'm going to put the pedal to the metal occasionally. Is this going to be that big a deal? Am I going to lose that much power, or am I really not going to see much, am I going to not see any difference by this being shrouded a little bit? Or should I do a little bit of port matching to gasket here and just blend where this gasket or where the headers are going to be shrouded to the cylinder? Should I blend them and open them up ever so slightly? Let me know what you think out there, all you guys that are tuning in on this. Let me hear what your experience is with these, what you've heard about other people that you know that have come across these situations, whether they just left it and it was fine, or whether they end up doing a bit of a port match to gasket with raised 80 thou over raised exhaust ports. Now I'm yet to actually install this onto my block to see how things are looking with my 2V intake manifold. Now I happen to have and have used for a long time an AFD 2V high-rise intake manifold on my stock iron Aussie 302 cylinder heads, and so I'm not anticipating having any issues, given that it was a intake manifold built for these cylinder heads, for this series 1. We say series 1 because series 2 has never eventuated, okay? And as far as I understand, AFD are actually no more. I think they were sold or they were sold to, bought by Competition Engines here in Australia, AFD, and I've been looking on the Facebook page for probably 2 years, waiting for the new AFD cylinder heads to come to fruition, and nothing has ever come to fruition. I'm not sure what's happening. Maybe because there's just so many copies of the AFD 2Vs available on the market now, the Aeroflows, the ProFlows, and there's a bunch of eBay sellers as well that don't list them as anything, but it's definitely these cylinder heads because I've looked at them, and they're so cheap, like some of those eBay sellers are selling these for only $1,400 for a pair. Right now, I don't know what they're like. I don't know what factory they've been cast at. Some of those really cheap ones, what factories they've been cast at in China. And if you get them, I dare say, if you bought those very cheap ones, I can guarantee that you will have to do quite a bit of work sorting those out if you actually want them to flow as they are meant to flow. These are meant to flow, and they did have them flow tested. Michael or Mick from Total Performance, he did 2 flow tests with these to get 2 comparisons, okay, of these cylinder heads. Once they'd taken out the lips that come with these, that's the only thing really that they did. They just tidied up the bowls a little bit with these, and they flow these at 310 at 600 lift is what they are apparently flowing. And when I was talking to Mick, he said that they dynoed a set of these 2 weeks ago. They've dynoed a set of these Detroit Racing product AFD 2V Series 1 copies, okay, on a 393 stroker. Now, I don't know what the engine combo was. I didn't go into great detail about that. I'm not sure. I think it was with a TFC high-rise intake manifold. I believe that was on it, on the dyno. I don't know what the ignition system was. I don't know what the timing was. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is that it made 586 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. And I thought that was pretty damn good. That's, 2V headed cylinder on a stroker 393. Depending on combinations, etc., depending on what other tidying up you would want to do with one of these, you could probably push that 600 horsepower naturally aspirated with a set of these cylinder heads. So that's what I'm going through doing at the moment. I'm just going to add a little bit more to what they've already done. It's nothing major. I undoubtedly could have chucked these on my engine as they are and had a really good street engine cylinder head with buckets of torque, buckets of power, but I'm just being finicky, and I'm going through and just touching up and just smoothing a couple of little things that I found that I can do that. I'm just doing it because I can. In the next video, I'm going to spend some time putting this on my engine and starting to mock up some clearances. See how the rocker geometry is, see how my push rod geometry is, the pinch point in here, which apparently can be an issue sometimes with the cylinder heads. Got to make sure all that stuff is good and there's no issues there. I will also probably end up doing a valve lap for the valves that came with these cylinder heads. As mentioned in the review video for these, I got a pack that included some 5000 series Ferreira stainless steel valves that come with these cylinder heads, but still, I'm still going to just at least lap all the valves in to the seats, because I just think that's a good idea. Okay, you don't know, I can't just put those valves in and trust that they're going to seal. I could do a leak down test, I guess. I will just lap them in. It won't take that long. It'll be a pretty quick lap. I'm just going to lap them in, so then I know that these valves are going to be lapped in and seated correctly to the seats. That's the only other thing I'm going to do with these heads, other than throw them on my engine. I've still got to get the cam back in my block, and I'm about to stop mucking around with this and head back out to the other shed where the engine block is, and I'm going to reinstall my cam and my lifters, so then I can do a few checks and balances in that area as well. That's just a quick update of where things are up to with these new AFD 2V Chinese copies from Total Performance, now branded as DRP or Detroit Racing Products. A nice little laser etched logo on the cylinder head ends with these as well. Okay guys, until I see you in the next video, you guys stay safe, stay healthy, and take it easy out there.